You'll never see your money again, my daughter Rebecca laughed, tossing the check back across the kitchen table. Her husband Jake smirked beside her, his arm draped possessively around her shoulder. I sat there frozen, my 67-year-old hands trembling slightly, as I stared at the returned check for $5,000, money I'd scraped together to help with their down payment. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too airless. Through the large bay window behind them, I could see their sleek new car in my driveway, easily worth $60,000. "Dad, we don't need your pittance," Rebecca continued, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Jake's making 6 figures now. This is honestly embarrassing." My son-in-law nodded, checking his expensive watch. "We only stopped by because Rebecca said we had to. Family obligation and all that." I looked around my modest kitchen where I'd raised Rebecca after her mother died. The same kitchen where I'd taught her to bake cookies, helped with her homework, and celebrated every birthday. Now 5 neighbors were sitting awkwardly at the table, invited for what I'd thought would be a celebration of Rebecca and Jake's new home purchase. Mrs. Peterson from next door shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Gaines, my fishing buddy, stared hard at his coffee mug. 3 other neighbors watched wide-eyed as my only child humiliated me in my own home. I slowly reached for the check, my arthritis making my fingers stiff. "I just wanted to help," I said quietly, "like I always have." Rebecca rolled her eyes. "Well, you can keep your charity. We don't need handouts from someone who still shops at discount stores and drives a car from the last century." Something shifted inside me then, a quiet click, like a key turning in a long rusted lock. I carefully folded the check and slipped it into my shirt pocket. "Very well," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "If that's how you feel, I'll respect your decision." Rebecca looked momentarily surprised at my calm. She'd expected tears, pleading, or anger, the usual tools she'd wielded against me for years. "But I think you should know," I continued. "This isn't just about today's check." Jake checked his watch again. "We really need to go. The realtor is waiting." I smiled slightly. "You might want to delay that meeting. What I'm about to say will change everything about your future plans." There was a time when Rebecca's laughter filled this house with joy, rather than cruelty. After losing my wife Maria to cancer when Rebecca was only 5, we became an inseparable team. The dynamic duo, as our neighbors called us. Every Saturday morning meant pancake competitions, where we'd try to create the most outlandish shapes. Rebecca's specialty was making what she called daddy pancakes, misshapen circles with batter hair sticking up in all directions that always made me laugh. Sundays were our adventure days. Sometimes we'd drive to the coast and collect shells. Other times we'd hike in the mountains or explore museums. Money was always tight on my teacher's salary, but we found happiness in simple things: camping trips instead of resorts, library books instead of buying new ones, creative homemade costumes instead of store-bought ones. "I don't need expensive things, Daddy," 8-year-old Rebecca once told me, her small hand in mine as we walked through a park. "Mrs. Johnson at school said the best things in life are free, like love and family." I treasured those words, writing them in my journal that night. Rebecca was growing up understanding what truly mattered. For her 16th birthday, I surprised her with a used car. Nothing fancy, but reliable. I'd worked extra summer school sessions for 2 years to save for it. "This is the best gift ever," she had exclaimed, hugging me so tightly I could barely breathe. "I promise I'll take good care of it, Dad. Thank you for always looking out for me." When Rebecca earned a partial scholarship to college, her eyes had filled with tears of gratitude. "I know how hard this will be on you financially," she'd said. "I promise I'll make you proud and pay you back someday." Just succeed and be happy, I'd told her. That's all the payback I need. Those memories now felt like scenes from a movie about someone else's life. When had my thoughtful, appreciative daughter transformed into this cold, materialistic woman sitting across from me? When had our comfortable, contented life together become something she spoke of with contempt? I never imagined those days were numbered, I said softly to myself, while Rebecca checked her phone impatiently. Rebecca's education had been my priority from the beginning. As a high school English teacher, I understood the value of learning, but my modest salary meant constant financial juggling. When Rebecca was 7, I sold my small boat, a treasured connection to weekend fishing trips with my own father, to pay for her to attend a prestigious summer arts program where her musical talent could flourish. $3,500 gone, but her beaming face when she played violin at the final recital was worth every penny. At age 10, when Rebecca needed braces, I took on evening tutoring sessions for an additional $7,000 over 2 years. The exhaustion was worth it to see her confident smile. For her high school years, I chose to live in a smaller house, in a good school district, rather than the more spacious home we could have afforded elsewhere. The difference cost me roughly $50,000 in home equity over those years, but Rebecca received an excellent education. College brought the heaviest financial burden. Despite her partial scholarship, I liquidated my modest investments worth $42,000 to cover her freshman year. For her sophomore year, I took a second mortgage on my house for $35,000. Junior year required me to cash in my life insurance policy for $28,000. And for her senior year, I delayed my retirement and worked summer sessions for an extra $22,000. Dad, I promise I'll pay you back once I get established, Rebecca had said at her graduation dinner. You've sacrificed so much for me. I had waved away her promise. Just be happy and successful. That's all I want. But the sacrifices continued. When Rebecca struggled to find a job after college, I covered her apartment rent for 14 months, $16,800. I withdrew from my dwindling retirement account. When she met Jake and they planned their wedding 3 years ago, I spent $32,000, my entire emergency fund, to give her the celebration she wanted. She had hugged me at the reception, whispering, "Thank you, Dad. I know this was too expensive, but it means the world to me." 2 years ago, when they wanted to take a dream vacation to Europe, I loaned them $12,000. "We'll pay you back by Christmas," Jake had promised. That money never returned, and when I gently mentioned it, Rebecca said, "Dad, don't be so stingy. You know we have student loans." Last year, when their car needed repairs, I gave them $4,500 without hesitation. And just 6 months ago, when Rebecca called saying they were short on rent, I sent $2,800 overnight. In total, over the years, I had given Rebecca over $250,000, nearly every spare dollar I had earned or saved. I'd worked into my late 60s instead of retiring at 60 as planned. I'd forgone travel, home improvements, and even necessary dental work to ensure Rebecca had everything she needed. And now, sitting across from me, she mocked my $5,000 check as a pittance. "Do you know what the total comes to, Rebecca?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you talking about?" she asked, clearly annoyed. "The money I've given you since you were born. I've kept track of every major expense. It totals just over $250,000. Jake scoffed. "Parents are supposed to provide for their kids. That's the job you signed up for." "Providing for basic needs is indeed a parent's responsibility," I agreed. But I went far beyond that. I gave you everything, Rebecca, even when it meant I had nothing left for myself. The escalation from subtle manipulation to outright abuse accelerated after Rebecca and Jake's failed attempt to involve my neighbors in their scheme. when Mrs. Peterson and others refused to corroborate their claims about my supposed cognitive decline. Their approach turned more aggressive. The first truly cruel incident occurred at my brother Robert's 72nd birthday dinner. Rebecca and Jake arrived late, interrupting Robert's speech to make a grand entrance. "Sorry we're delayed," Rebecca announced loudly. "We had to stop by Dad's house because he called us in a panic, couldn't find his wallet again." This was a complete fabrication. I hadn't called them at all that day. When I quietly corrected her later, Jake laughed. "Come on, Harold, you don't remember calling? That's exactly what we're worried about." Several family members exchanged concerned glances. My brother's wife, Patricia, squeezed my hand supportively under the table. "I've been with Harold all afternoon," she told Rebecca. "He didn't call anyone." Rebecca's face hardened momentarily before she forced a laugh. "Well, someone called. Dad, you really should consider getting one of those medical alert systems." The next incident was more public. During a community fundraiser at the local library where I volunteered weekly, Rebecca and Jake made a show of helping me navigate the simple buffet line. "Dad needs a bit of assistance these days," Rebecca announced to the library director, a woman who worked with me regularly. "His coordination isn't what it used to be." The director looked confused. "Harold reshelved 3 carts of books just yesterday without any issues." Jake put his arm around Rebecca. "Denial is common with aging parents. We're looking into some memory care options, actually." Several people within earshot turned to stare. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger as Rebecca loudly discussed care options, as if I weren't standing right there. The third incident crossed into financial abuse. I discovered Rebecca had called my home insurance company, claiming to be managing my affairs and attempting to have herself added to my policy as an authorized person. "Your daughter was quite insistent," my insurance agent explained when she called to verify the request. "When I explained we needed your written authorization, she said you weren't mentally capable of providing it." My agent, who had known me for decades, immediately flagged the account to prevent unauthorized changes and alerted me to the attempt. The most devastating incident came during what should have been a joyful occasion, my retirement community's annual Achievement Awards, where I was being recognized for establishing a tutoring program for underprivileged children. I had invited Rebecca and Jake, hoping to share this proud moment. They arrived as the ceremony was beginning, drawing attention as they found their seats. When my name was called, and I went to accept the small trophy and certificate, I heard Jake's loud whisper, "Should we really let him up there alone? What if he gets confused?" Several people turned to look as I stood at the podium. Rebecca responded at equal volume, "I've got the car keys ready if we need to take him home." My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the award. The program director, noticing my distress, gently asked if I wanted to say a few words. "Thank you," I managed, looking out at the supportive faces of my community and the calculating expressions of my daughter and son-in-law. This program matters because everyone deserves dignity and respect, regardless of their circumstances or age. As I returned to my seat, Rebecca immediately stood up. "We should get Dad home now. It's been a long day for him." "The reception hasn't even started," I protested. "Dad, you're clearly exhausted," she said loudly. "We don't want a repeat of last month's episode." There had been no episode last month or ever. My friend Thomas, seated nearby, intervened. "Harold seems fine to me. Why don't you let him enjoy his moment?" Rebecca's expression darkened. "With all due respect, we know what's best for our father." The tension was palpable as people watched uncomfortably. In that moment, seeing the barely concealed contempt in my daughter's eyes, I knew we had passed the point of reconciliation. This was no longer about money. It was about control and cruelty. Later that evening, alone in my house, I called Sarah Chen. "It's time," I said. "I've given them every chance to change course." "Are you absolutely certain?" she asked. "Once we proceed, your relationship with your daughter may never be the same." I thought about the daughter I had raised, the little girl who made daddy pancakes and promised to make me proud. Then I thought about the woman who had just publicly humiliated me during one of my proudest moments. "The relationship already isn't the same," I replied, "and I need to protect myself before they take everything, including my dignity." The breaking point came unexpectedly during what should have been a simple birthday celebration. I had invited 5 close friends to my home to celebrate my 70th birthday with a modest dinner. Rebecca and Jake had initially declined the invitation, claiming they had important networking events that weekend. However, they appeared unannounced, just as my friends and I were sitting down to eat, Rebecca carrying a small, hastily wrapped package. "Surprise, Dad," she called out with artificial cheerfulness. "We rearranged our schedules to be here for your special day." Jake nodded. Couldn't miss the big 7-0. Something about their sudden change of plans made me uneasy, but I welcomed them, asking Mrs. Peterson to set 2 more places at the table. The conversation flowed pleasantly through the first course, a soup my late wife had loved to make. Rebecca barely touched hers, while Jake checked his phone repeatedly under the table. When I rose to bring the main course from the kitchen, Rebecca followed me. "Dad, Jake and I have been talking," she began, leaning against the counter as I transferred the roasted chicken to a serving platter. "We think it's time you considered downsizing." "Rebecca, we've discussed this," I replied calmly. "I'm happy in my home." "But that's just it," she persisted. "This place is too much responsibility. And with your recent episodes, we're concerned about your safety." I set down the carving knife. "What episodes are you referring to exactly?" She waved vaguely. "You know, the confusion, the forgetfulness. Mrs. Peterson mentioned you got lost walking home from the market last week. This was an outright lie. Mrs. Peterson had done no such thing, and I knew the neighborhood like the back of my hand after 40 years. "Rebecca," I said carefully, "why would Mrs. Peterson tell you that when it never happened? She's sitting right out there. Shall we ask her?" A flash of calculation crossed my daughter's face before she forced a concerned smile. "Dad, the denial is part of the problem. Jake and I have been researching some lovely communities where you'll have care available when you need it." "Communities that would require selling my house," I observed. "Well, yes," she admitted. "But you don't need all this space, and frankly, the equity could help secure your future care, and maybe help us finally get into our dream home in Lakeside Estates." So there it was, the real motivation laid bare. "Let's rejoin our guests," I said, picking up the platter. "Today is a celebration, not the time for this discussion." When we returned to the dining room, Jake was showing my friend something on his phone. "See, this is the place we're considering for Harold and I," he was saying. "They have staff to monitor medication and prevent wandering." 5 pairs of eyes turned to me in shock as I set down the chicken. "Harold doesn't need any monitoring," Mr. Gaines said gruffly. "We played chess yesterday, and he beat me soundly as usual." Jake smiled condescendingly. "With all due respect, you don't see him day to day like we do. The decline can be rapid at his age." "Except they don't see me day to day either," I pointed out, my voice steady despite my rising anger. "They visit perhaps once a month, if that," Rebecca jumped in smoothly. "That's because it's becoming distressing to witness. Dad, remember last week when you called us at midnight, confused about what year it was?" Another complete fabrication. Mrs. Peterson set down her fork. I speak with Harold nearly every day, and he's sharper than most people half his age." "You're being deceived," Jake said flatly. "Cognitive decline often presents as perfectly normal behavior to casual observers, while family members see the true picture." I looked around at my 5 friends, people who had known me for decades, who spoke with me regularly, who trusted my judgment and advice. They were watching Jake and Rebecca with growing dismay and suspicion. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "I'd like you to explain why you attempted to access my insurance policy without my knowledge or permission." Her smile faltered. "I was trying to help. And perhaps you could clarify why you told Dr. Mercer I was experiencing memory problems when I wasn't present at that appointment." Jake jumped in. "Harold, you're getting agitated. This is exactly what we're concerned about." "I'm not agitated," I replied evenly. "I'm asking straightforward questions." "See how defensive he's getting?" Rebecca stage whispered to the table. "This is part of the pattern." The room fell silent. My friends looked between us, confusion giving way to understanding as they witnessed the manipulation happening in real time. I walked slowly to the sideboard where I kept important papers. From a folder, I withdrew the check Rebecca had mocked earlier, the $5,000 I had offered toward their down payment. "You said I'd never see this money again," I stated, looking directly at my daughter. "That my contribution was a pittance compared to what you deserved." For the first time, Rebecca looked unsure. "Dad, you're twisting my words." "Am I?" I unfolded a second paper, a bank statement showing a $12,000 transfer to Rebecca labeled European Vacation Loan, dated 3 years ago. "You also said you'd repay this and this." I placed down evidence of each substantial gift or loan: the wedding contribution, the car repair, the rent assistance. "Dad, this is ridiculous," Rebecca sputtered. "No one keeps records like this unless they're planning to hold it over someone's head. Or unless they suspect they're being taken advantage of," Mrs. Peterson observed quietly. Jake stood abruptly. "We came here out of concern for your father's well-being, and he's turning this into some kind of financial audit. This is exactly the paranoid behavior we're worried about." My friend Thomas, a retired judge, shook his head. "This doesn't look like paranoia to me, Jake. It looks like a man protecting himself with facts." Rebecca stood now, too, her face flushed. "You have no idea what we deal with. Dad's been hoarding money for years while we've struggled with student loans and housing costs. He lives in this paid-off house while we can barely afford our apartment." "The house I paid off while raising you alone and putting you through college," I responded, my voice finally betraying some emotion. Jake grabbed Rebecca's arm. "This is pointless. Your father's clearly been planning this ambush for weeks. This whole dinner was just a setup." Mrs. Peterson had heard enough. "Young man, I've known Harold for 30 years. He wouldn't set up anyone. But it appears you two have been setting him up for something far worse." Rebecca snatched up her purse. "We're trying to protect him and his assets before he makes poor decisions. Someone needs to take control before there's nothing left." That's when I said it, the words that changed everything. "Rebecca, I've decided you're right. I do need to protect my assets, starting with protecting them from you." The room went silent. My daughter stared at me, momentarily speechless. "What are you saying?" she finally asked, a note of uncertainty in her voice. I looked at my only child, feeling a deep sadness but also an unfamiliar strength. "I'm saying that until you remember the daughter I raised you to be, you've seen the last dollar you'll ever get from me." Jake laughed dismissively. "Empty threats, Harold. We're your only family. Who else would you leave it to?" I didn't respond directly. Instead, I turned to my friends. "Thank you all for being here today. It means more than you know." As Rebecca and Jake moved toward the door, I called after them. "One more thing. I've made arrangements with my attorney. Any attempts to challenge my competency will trigger immediate legal consequences. I have extensive medical documentation of my mental capacity, dated and certified by multiple specialists." Rebecca froze in the doorway, her back to me. "You can come back when you're ready to be my daughter again, not my predator," I said quietly. "The door will always be open for that." She didn't turn around, just grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him outside. The door slammed behind them with a finality that echoed through my home. My friends sat in stunned silence until Mrs. Peterson reached over and covered my hand with hers. "Harold, I had no idea things had gotten this bad." "Neither did I admitted, until I started paying attention." 3 days after the disastrous birthday dinner, Rebecca and Jake appeared on my doorstep unannounced. Jake looked smug, Rebecca determined. "Dad, we need to talk," she began, as they pushed past me into the living room without waiting for an invitation. "We've been discussing your situation, and we think it's time for a family meeting about finances." I noticed Jake carrying a folder thick with papers. "What kind of meeting, Owen?" I asked, though I already knew. Jake spread the documents on my coffee table. "We've put together some options for transitional housing, places with support services, but still some independence. And we've drafted a financial power of attorney," Rebecca added, "for your protection." "I see," I said calmly. "And when did you plan to discuss this with my attorney?" Jake waved dismissively. "Family matters shouldn't require expensive legal consultation. We can handle this ourselves." "Actually," I replied, "I've already consulted with legal counsel, and I've made some decisions of my own." I picked up my phone and made a brief call. "Sarah, they're here. Could you join us, please? And bring Michael if he's available." Within 10 minutes, my doorbell rang. I opened it to admit Sarah Chen, my attorney, and Michael Rodriguez, my investigator friend. Both carried professional-looking portfolios. "What is this?" Rebecca demanded as I introduced them. "This," I explained, "is my response to your campaign to have me declared incompetent and seize control of my assets." Jake immediately went on the offensive. "That's ridiculous. We're trying to help you, not control you." Sarah calmly opened her portfolio. "Then perhaps you can explain these," she said, laying out copies of the elder care facility brochures, identical to the ones Jake had brought, dated 2 months earlier. "Or these." She added printouts of emails between Rebecca and the facility's intake coordinator, discussing expedited admission for me. "Or maybe," Michael added, "you could explain the consultation with Dr. Rankin about competency evaluations." He placed a sworn statement from the doctor's receptionist, confirming Jake had inquired about having me evaluated without my knowledge or presence. Rebecca's face went pale. "You've been spying on us?" "No," I corrected. "I've been protecting myself after overhearing your plans to have me declared incompetent, so you could access my assets." Jake tried to recover. "You clearly misunderstood a private conversation." Did I misunderstand this too? I pulled out a recording device and played back their conversation with the real estate attorney I'd overheard, discussing how to gain control of my house through guardianship proceedings. The blood drained from Rebecca's face as she heard her own voice, clearly saying, "Once we have guardianship, the property sale can proceed regardless of his objections." Jake lunged for the recorder, but Michael smoothly intercepted him. "That would be tampering with evidence, son." "Evidence? Of what?" Rebecca demanded, her voice shaking. "We haven't done anything illegal." "Not yet," Sarah agreed, "but conspiracy to commit elder abuse and financial exploitation is taken very seriously by the courts, as is filing false reports of mental incompetence." I held up my hand. That's enough. I didn't invite you here to threaten you, Rebecca. I wanted you to understand that I'm fully aware of what you've been planning. So what now? Jake asked, his smugness replaced by wariness. You'll disown your own daughter over a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Asalta, I said quietly. But I'm not disowning anyone. I'm protecting what I've worked for my entire life. I nodded to Sarah, who opened another folder. Harold asked me to prepare some documents showing his actual financial situation. He thought you might be interested. She slid a financial statement across the coffee table. Rebecca picked it up, scanned it, then looked up in shock. This says you have investment accounts worth over $1.2 million, she whispered, plus the house equity. That's far more than you thought, I finished for her. Yes. But you drive an old car, Jake blurted. You buy store-brand groceries. You wear the same clothes for years. Because I value simplicity and saving, I explained. The same values I tried to teach Rebecca. Where did all this money come from? She demanded. I invested consistently throughout my teaching career, living below my means, maximizing my pension contributions. When your mother died, her life insurance provided additional investment capital. The miracle of compound interest did the rest. All this time, Rebecca's voice trailed off. All this time I've been financially secure, I confirmed, while simultaneously supporting you far beyond what most parents could afford. The $250,000 I've given you over the years came from careful planning, not desperation. Sarah laid out another document. Harold has updated his estate plan. I think you should know the terms. Jake leaned forward eagerly, but Rebecca just stared at me, her expression unreadable. 50% of my estate will go to establish a scholarship fund for students pursuing education degrees, I explained. 25% will fund a trust supporting elder abuse prevention programs. I paused, watching their faces as the implications sank in. The remaining 25% will be held in trust for you, Rebecca, but with conditions. What conditions? Jake demanded. The trust will cover legitimate education expenses, medical needs, or emergencies, but you won't control the principal. The trustee will make distributions based on genuine need, not wants. Rebecca finally found her voice. You're treating me like a child. No, I corrected gently. I'm treating you like someone who's shown she can't be trusted with unrestricted access to money. Your actions led us here, not mine. Who's the trustee? Jake asked, already calculating. Angles. A bank trust department with strict oversight, Sarah answered. Not an individual who could be pressured or manipulated. Rebecca stood suddenly. So that's it? You've planned out everything to control me even after you're gone? Not to control you, I said sadly. To protect what I've built from being squandered, and perhaps to teach you the lesson I failed to teach you in life, that money should enable freedom, not become the purpose of existence. Jake grabbed Rebecca's arm. This is bullshit. We can challenge this. Wills get overturned all the time. Michael cleared his throat. That would be unwise. The documentation we've assembled of your conspiracy would make any challenge problematic. Rebecca stared at me for a long moment. You planned all this, while pretending to be the helpless old man we thought you were. I'm not helpless, I said simply. I never was, and now you know it. Word of Rebecca and Jake's failed scheme spread quickly through our community. Not through my doing. I'd kept the details private out of respect for my daughter, but through their own indiscreet complaints to mutual acquaintances. Can you believe it? Rebecca had apparently told her cousin. Dad's been sitting on over $1 million while acting like he barely gets by, and now he's practically cutting us out of his will. The cousin, uncomfortable with Rebecca's entitled attitude, mentioned it to her mother, my late wife's sister, who called me immediately. "Harold, what's going on with Rebecca? She's telling everyone you've hidden money and are punishing her for trying to help you." When I explained the truth, including their documented attempts to have me declared incompetent, my sister-in-law was horrified. "Maria would be heartbroken," she said, referring to my late wife. "That's not how we raised her to behave." 3 weeks after our confrontation, a more public reckoning occurred. Our community center was hosting its annual fundraising dinner, an event Rebecca and Jake usually attended to network with local business leaders. They hadn't RSVP'd this year, likely expecting I'd withdraw in embarrassment. Instead, I arrived with Sarah Chen as my guest. We were seated at a table with several community leaders, including the bank president and the hospital board chair, people who knew me through my volunteer work. Halfway through the evening, Rebecca and Jake entered, pausing when they spotted me. After a whispered conference, they approached our table. "Dad," Rebecca began stiffly, "we didn't expect to see you here." "I never miss the community center fundraiser," I replied. "I'm on the board, remember?" Jake forced a smile toward the others at the table. "Harold's been having some health challenges lately, but he's pushing through." Sarah Chen extended her hand. "Sarah Chen, elder law attorney. Mr. Foster is in excellent health, according to his recent comprehensive evaluations." Jake's smile froze. The bank president, Martin Williams, looked between us curiously. "Harold, I didn't realize you'd changed legal representation. I thought the Johnsons had handled your affairs for years." "They manage my basic needs," I confirmed. "Miss Chen specializes in elder law and asset protection. Given recent concerns about attempts to access my finances without authorization, I needed specialized counsel." Rebecca's face flushed. "Dad, this isn't appropriate dinner conversation." "Perhaps not," agreed the hospital board chair, Dr. Elaine Mercer. "But as someone who serves on our elder care committee, I'm disturbed by what I've been hearing. Harold, is it true someone tried to have you declared incompetent without your knowledge?" All eyes turned to Rebecca and Jake, who suddenly looked cornered. "There's been a misunderstanding," Jake began. "No misunderstanding," I corrected firmly. "My daughter and son-in-law explored having me declared mentally incompetent to gain control of my assets. They fabricated concerns about my mental health, attempted to recruit my physician and neighbors to support false claims, and consulted with attorneys about forcing the sale of my home." The table fell silent. Rebecca looked around desperately. "Dad had been showing concerning signs," she tried to explain. "We were worried." "So worried you discussed my cognitive decline with a real estate attorney?" I asked quietly. "So worried you sent questionnaires to my neighbors asking for evidence of mental deterioration? So worried you checked my credit reports without authorization?" Martin Williams, who had known me for decades, shook his head. "Harold is one of the sharpest minds on our community investment committee. Whatever you thought you observed, it wasn't cognitive decline." Jake attempted damage control. "We may have been overzealous in our concern, but nothing," Dr. Mercer interrupted. "What you're describing is textbook elder exploitation. As mandatory reporters, healthcare providers are required by law to report such attempts." "You can't report us for something we didn't do," Rebecca protested. "We didn't," I assured her, "although we had every right to. Instead, I've taken legal steps to protect myself and modified my estate plan accordingly." The event photographer approached, asking to take a picture of our table for the community newsletter. As we arranged ourselves, Rebecca and Jake stood awkwardly to the side, excluded from the group. "Would you like to be in the photo?" the photographer asked them. Before they could answer, Martin Williams spoke up. They were just leaving, I believe. The dismissal was unmistakable. Rebecca and Jake retreated without another word, their social standing in the community visibly crumbling as they walked away. After they'd gone, Dr. Mercer patted my hand. I'm sorry you had to experience that, Harold. Elder abuse is tragically common, but when it comes from one's own children, the important thing is that Harold took action to protect himself, Sarah pointed out. Many seniors are too ashamed or frightened to do so, which is why I've decided to speak about my experience, I announced, surprising even myself with the decision. The Community Center's senior program has asked for presentations on financial security. I've offered to share my story, not to humiliate Rebecca, but to help others recognize the warning signs I initially missed. Martin Williams nodded approvingly. That takes courage, and it could help many vulnerable seniors. As we enjoyed dessert, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The public exposure of Rebecca and Jake's scheme wasn't the justice I had sought. In truth, I'd hoped to handle everything privately. But their own actions had forced this outcome, and perhaps it was necessary, not as punishment, but as protection for others they might have targeted if their plans had succeeded with me. In the months following the confrontation at the community center, Rebecca and Jake faced natural consequences far beyond anything I could have orchestrated. Jake's employer, a financial services firm priding itself on ethical client relationships, called him in for a meeting after hearing rumors about his attempt to manipulate an elderly relative's finances. They put me on probation, he complained in a rare phone call to me, and I've been removed from the senior client portfolio. This is your fault for spreading stories. I haven't spread any stories, Jake, I replied truthfully. Your own actions are speaking for themselves. Rebecca faced social ostracism from family friends who had known her since childhood. Long-standing dinner invitations dried up. Community organizations where she'd sought leadership roles suddenly had no openings available. The real estate dream house they'd planned to buy with my money fell through when they couldn't qualify for the mortgage on their own. The rejection letter specifically cited character concerns raised during the enhanced background check, standard procedure for jumbo loans in our area. I took no pleasure in their struggles, but I recognized them as natural repercussions of broken trust. Meanwhile, my own life entered an unexpected renaissance. Freed from the anxiety of Rebecca and Jake's manipulation, I pursued interests I'd long postponed. I expanded the community tutoring program, which now served over 100 underprivileged students. I joined a travel group of retired teachers, taking my first international trip to Greece, a destination my late wife and I had always dreamed of visiting together. The local community college invited me to teach a course on personal finance for seniors, incorporating lessons from my own experience. The class filled to capacity within days of being announced. You've become something of a folk hero among the senior set, Mrs. Peterson teased, during one of our regular card games. The teacher who outsmarted the schemers. I downplayed such characterizations, but I couldn't deny the renewed sense of purpose I'd found. My experience had transformed me from a potential victim into an advocate. 4 months after our final confrontation, I received a surprising letter from Rebecca. Handwritten, not typed. Dad, I've had a lot of time to think about what happened between us. At first, I was angry and blamed you for overreacting. But I've come to see that what Jake and I planned was wrong, no matter how we justified it to ourselves. Jake and I are separating. His response to our current difficulties showed me sides of him I can no longer ignore or excuse. I realize now he influenced me toward values that weren't mine originally. Materialism, status, viewing people as means to ends. I'm not asking for forgiveness or financial support. I've found a job at a small marketing firm and am starting over in a modest apartment. For the first time in years, I'm fully supporting myself. What I'm asking for is a chance, someday, to have a conversation. Not about money or inheritance or the past, but about finding our way to some new kind of relationship, if that's even possible. I miss the father I took for granted. I miss the person I used to be before money and status became my measures of worth. Rebecca. I read the letter several times, looking for manipulation or hidden agendas, but found only what appeared to be genuine remorse and resignation. After consulting with Sarah Chen, who advised caution but acknowledged positive signs in the communication, I sent a brief reply. Rebecca, thank you for your letter. I appreciate your honesty and self-reflection. I've never stopped loving you, even when I had to protect myself from your actions. I'm open to a conversation when you're ready. Perhaps we could meet for coffee at the community center next month. Neutral ground for a new beginning. 2 weeks later, we met. The conversation was awkward, tentative, but free from the manipulative undertones that had poisoned our recent interactions. Rebecca looked different. Simpler clothes, less flashy jewelry, more reminiscent of the daughter I'd raised than the status-obsessed woman she'd become. I've been seeing a therapist, she admitted, trying to understand how I became someone who could plot against her own father. What have you learned? I asked. She looked down at her coffee. That I got lost somewhere between wanting security and demanding luxury. That I started measuring my worth by possessions instead of character. That I listened to Jake's values instead of remembering yours and Mom's. It wasn't full redemption, but it was a start. We agreed to proceed slowly. Monthly coffee meetings, no financial discussions, no expectations on either side. As I drove home that evening, I found myself thinking about the lesson at the heart of my experience. That true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in dignity. My financial resources had provided security, but it was self-respect that had truly saved me. The unwillingness to be diminished or controlled, even by those I loved. I had established a foundation in Rebecca's name focused on financial literacy for young adults, funded with a portion of the money that would have gone directly to her. Whether she would ever become trustworthy enough to participate in its management remained to be seen, but the foundation would ensure that something positive emerged from our painful journey. That night, I added a final entry to the journal documenting my experience. At 70, I faced a choice between peace at any price and dignity at great cost. I chose dignity, and in doing so, perhaps offered my daughter her best chance at finding her way back to the person I raised her to be. Money can be managed, invested, protected, or lost, but self-respect, once surrendered, is hardest of all to reclaim. In protecting mine, I may have helped Rebecca begin to reclaim hers. Next morning, I recorded a video sharing key parts of my story for my growing YouTube channel focused on senior empowerment. Looking directly into the camera, I concluded with words I hoped might help others. If you've faced betrayal from those you love, know that you're not alone. Your age doesn't diminish your right to respect. Your generosity doesn't obligate you to exploitation, and your love for family doesn't require surrendering your dignity. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I read every comment and am grateful for this community we're building together. Until next time, remember that your life experience isn't a liability. It's your greatest asset. I hit upload, then sat back in my chair feeling a sense of completion. The daughter who had mocked me with, "You'll never see your money again," had indeed never seen it, at least not in the way she'd planned. Instead, she was beginning to see something far more valuable, the path back to integrity, guided by a father who had found the courage to say, "Enough." If you found value in my story, please like and subscribe. I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Your support means everything as we build this community of wisdom and mutual respect.